Now, batch fades are the fastest, easiest, dirtiest fade that's out there. And what I mean by dirtiest is it's not a clean precision fade. One of the things you're going to learn as you're in Pro Tools and as you work with a DAW for a while is the fade, how you fade in, how you fade out, and how you crossfade, and even the points where you crossfade are something that you both master and that you also bring art to. And so, as simple as it sounds, how you make your fade choices really actually has impact on the overall sonic signature of the song because of the way things are coming and going. And so, batch fade is like this dumb, let's just fade everybody to get the job done kind of scenario. So, you use it when you're going to use batch fade when it's an appropriate time, or maybe when you're quickly punching through a bunch of fades that you just need done and they're not really going to be imperative or impact, the overall big picture. As a great example on a batch fade, one of the reasons that I use batch fade more commonly is when I'm going to set up a loop kit, a loop of anything, and in this case, I'm going to just use this loop kit. We had this drum set up here from before, and if I go in and I say, well, these drums, I need these drums to loop, along down the way for a while. Well, I'm going to go do that from one bar to the next. And that's great. I can easily do it as long as I'm highlighting using the grid mode. As long as I'm highlighting using the grid mode, and I'm in bars and beats in the counter, then I can loop this thing all day, and I can do it in a couple different ways. I can use the loop command using trim. I can also, if I go to the edit window, there's a repeat function. I can tell it, let's repeat 100 times. I'm just going to type in 20 as an example. As long as I have it highlighted on the grid, it's going to do its job just nicely. But I could also hit Command D a bunch. I could just, as long as I'm hovered over it, Command D, and just, go as far as I really want to. And there's that drum loop just over and over and over again. Now, musically, that's not going to sound the greatest. So we have to do some things to it. But this is just an example. Now, from here, I can triple click, and I'm just going to go using my selector tool, go 1, 2, 3. And over the whole thing, what you're going to notice is there's audio clips coming and going everywhere. And then there's all those transition points that I just made when I made the duplicate. Transition in, transition out. And that's when a good batch fade, hitting Command F, is useful. Because those are real simple fades. We don't have to do a whole bunch to them. We may want to change a little bit on the very front end and the very back end. But we can also say, okay, if we know, as an example, there's not a front and a back to any other portion of those clips except for the very beginning and the very end, because they constantly play through. So every transitional fade is going to be a crossfade except for the very start and the very end. So if I want that very start to kind of come in a little bit more quickly, what I could say is, all right, I want the start to have this slope, and I want the start to be a 2 millisecond fade in. Great. On the fade out, let's say, nope, I actually want this one to be a 30-second fade out, and I'm going to go ahead and let it, pull straight out, or maybe I'm going to have it be a little bit more slopey to let elongate. What happens with this one is this particular fade out shape is really nice, and it's used a lot when we fade out because the strength of the fade comes in nice and naturally, but it moves pretty quick. And then it continues along this kind of lower volume path, which feels a lot more natural to the human ear. We can do those. And I could say, you know what, all my crossfades, I don't want them to be 10 milliseconds. I want them to be 4. And there's a ton of different options that we can use here. Notice that these placements of where that crossfade could be forward, leaning back, or centered. And then, you can essentially hit, if for some reason there's already fades there, you can tell it to create new ones, or just leave the ones that are there already there, or adjust any existing ones to match this slope, adjust them to match this length, and each one of those has that option: crossfade, fade out, all that stuff. So if we, as an example, it's like, if I already had crossfades in it, I don't want those crossfades to change. Let's leave them just the way they were, but all the new ones I want to be adjusted to this shape at 4 milliseconds, and then you hit OK. It's going to process it like it was nothing, and you just go through. You should be able to see every single thing that you asked for exist, in that whole scenario with those batch fades, and they should look pretty good, you know. And then you should definitely audition them. I think one thing that's also missed in that process is a lot of times people just do the fade, move on, and never listen to it. It might not sound the best, and it might actually have artifacts in it, other sounds or weird transitions. I think the biggest thing that is a warning to all is you have to remember that in the crossfade process, you're allowing the previous clip to continue into the new clip, which means if you do it too long, you're going to be essentially crossfading and allowing parts of this previous clip to still exist on this side as we transition, and that might not be appropriate. So it is important to keep an eye on that. And if you really don't want that, and if you, especially if it has a nice seamless transition and that thing's not, doesn't really need a long crossfade, minimize it. You know, it'll keep any extra stuff from occurring that doesn't need to on this side of the crossfade, essentially, or in the crossfade process. You know, an easy one like that I always see, dialogue specifically doesn't need a long crossfade. Most of the time in dialogue, you're trying to crossfade the gap and not the actual word, you know, because if you crossfade words, you're going to get a jumbly, weird mess in the crossfade. But if you're doing elongated sounds like this, they're nice and natural and pretty smooth. Same thing with drums. It's like if we were trying to crossfade, for example, this is one right here, and this is a last thought for you here, just to keep an eye on how you do these, when you do them, and making sure that they're accurate. You see where this new clip comes in right here, and the issue is if the previous clip, timing wise, is slightly off, and I'm actually going to bump it so that you can see what I'm talking about. If that previous clip is slightly off, and I look at this and I go, oh, well, this clip starts here, but the previous clip is in the way. You see how that's an issue. We definitely do not want to crossfade it like this. We have to pull this out this way. And the problem with it is think about where that comes in. If I didn't pull it enough to the left and I crossfade it now, I'm actually still going to have that extra hit come before my real one right here. So we have to make sure that when we're crossfading, we keep them nice and tight when we have that issue. And we also slide them over far enough where there's still going to be nothing. So we're really crossfading silence at this point, and is in this transition right before we see the hit. And it should sound nice and natural. So it's something you're going to get great at if you're going to be working in this world. You're going to be doing it all the time. I mean, it's like even in a recording session, it's fade, crossfade. I mean, you're just doing it very repetitiously, and you're doing it all the time. You get used to what you can and you can't get away with, and you have to audition it and be sensitive to what it sounds like and how it affects everybody else in the track.